If this story touches your heart, please consider subscribing, leaving a like, and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Your support means more than you know. Now take a deep breath, because what you're about to hear may stay with you for a long time. Dear readers, my heart is heavy as I write this, but I need to share what happened to me. Maybe some of you have been where I was. Maybe my story will help you find the strength I wish I'd found sooner. This is a story about love, sacrifice, and learning that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is choose yourself. 3 years ago, my daughter Sarah called me crying at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. Her husband Mark had lost his job at the manufacturing plant where he'd worked for 8 years, and they were drowning in debt with 2 young children. Little Emma was only 4 years old, still believing in fairy tales and magic, and baby Jake had just turned 1, taking his wobbly first steps around their cramped apartment. "Mom, I don't know what we're going to do," she sobbed over the phone, her voice breaking with desperation I hadn't heard since she was a teenager. "The bank sent another letter today. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage, and they're starting foreclosure proceedings. The electricity company called twice this week, and Mark's unemployment barely covers groceries." I could hear Jake crying in the background and Emma asking in her sweet little voice, "Mommy, why are you sad?" My heart shattered into a million pieces for all of them. I'd raised Sarah alone after her father left when she was 12, walking out one morning with nothing but a suitcase and a note saying he needed to find himself. I remembered those sleepless nights that followed, sitting at my kitchen table with bills spread out like playing cards, counting pennies and making impossible choices between groceries and gas, between medicine and electricity. I remembered the shame of using food stamps, the pride swallowed when accepting help from church food banks, the tears shed in empty grocery store aisles when I had to put back items we needed but couldn't afford. I couldn't let my baby go through that darkness with her own babies depending on her. "Pack up the kids," I told her without a moment's hesitation. "Bring them here. You can stay with me temporarily until Mark finds work. We'll figure this out together, sweetheart. Family takes care of family." The relief in her voice was immediate and overwhelming. "Oh, Mom, thank you. I don't know what we'd do without you. I promise it'll just be for a few weeks, just until we get back on our feet." But as the weeks stretched into months, I realized my small 2-bedroom house wasn't enough for a family of 4, plus myself. Sarah and Mark needed the master bedroom with its attached bathroom and larger closet. The children needed their own space to play and sleep without waking each other. Emma was having nightmares about the bad men taking our house, and Jake was fussy from the constant disruption and lack of routine. I was sleeping on the same floral couch I'd owned for 15 years, my back aching every morning from the lumpy cushions and awkward angles. My clothes were stored in boxes in the hallway closet. My reading chair, where I'd spent countless peaceful evenings with my books and tea, was buried under children's toys, and Mark's job search papers scattered everywhere. The cramped quarters were stressing everyone, especially little Emma, who'd gone from an outgoing, cheerful child to crying constantly and clinging to my legs. She'd wet the bed 3 times in 2 weeks, something she hadn't done in over a year. Jake, normally a happy baby, became colicky and would only sleep if someone was holding him. That's when Sarah mentioned they'd found a rental house through a friend at her part-time job at the daycare. 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a fenced backyard, perfect for the children, and in a good school district for Emma's upcoming kindergarten year. It sounded like a dream come true for them. "If only we had help with the deposit and first month's rent," she sighed one evening, bouncing a crying Jake on her hip while stirring mac and cheese for dinner. "And honestly, even if we could move in, I don't know how we'd manage the monthly payments on top of everything else. Mark's been looking for work for 4 months now, and nothing's coming through." I watched my daughter's tired face, saw the dark circles under her eyes, noticed how thin she'd become from stress and skipping meals to make sure the children ate first. I thought about my late husband Robert, who'd always said, "Rose, money in the bank means nothing if your family is suffering." I made a decision that seemed so clear and right at the time. I'd lived in my house for 28 years. Robert and I had bought it as newlyweds, brought Sarah home from the hospital to that house, celebrated birthdays and holidays within those walls. It was paid off, filled with memories and love, But what good were memories when my family was struggling? What value did sentiment have when my grandchildren needed stability? I called the realtor that very afternoon, my hands shaking as I dialed the number. "Grandma Rose is going to fix everything," I whispered to Emma that night, stroking her soft, curly hair as she finally fell asleep on my lap after another evening of tears and bad dreams. "Everything's going to be okay, sunshine. Grandma's going to make sure you have a real home again." The house sold within 3 weeks to a young couple expecting their first baby. They walked through my home with such excitement, pointing out where they'd put the nursery, talking about the garden they'd plant in the backyard where Sarah had learned to ride her bike. I smiled and nodded, but each room they claimed felt like losing another piece of myself. The hardest part was deciding what to keep. 28 years of memories had to fit into one bedroom. I kept only the essentials: my bed, a dresser, my rocking chair that had been my mother's, and a few precious photographs. Everything else had to go. I sold my grandmother's antique dining room set, the one she'd saved for months to buy during the Depression, polishing it lovingly every Sunday after church. The piano I'd worked overtime shifts at the diner to purchase, where Sarah had taken lessons for 6 years and played Christmas carols every December. Robert's tools from the garage, still organized exactly as he'd left them, still carrying the scent of his aftershave and the dreams of weekend projects we'd planned, but never completed. Each piece sold felt like losing a member of my family. The young mother who bought my grandmother's china held each piece reverently, promising to take good care of it. But I cried in my car afterward, grieving for Sunday dinners and holiday celebrations that had made those dishes more than mere objects. With the money from the house sale and possessions, I had enough to cover the deposit and first 3 months' rent for Sarah's family's new home, plus a substantial contribution toward future expenses. The joy on my grandchildren's faces when they saw their new bedrooms made every sacrifice worthwhile. Emma squealed with delight at her pink princess room, spinning in circles with her arms outstretched. "It's like a castle, Grandma Rose. Am I really a princess now?" "You've always been a princess, sweetheart," I told her, tears of happiness streaming down my face. "Now you just have a room to match." Jake had his own nursery with a beautiful crib and changing table, soft blue walls, and a mobile of farm animals that played gentle lullabies. He clapped his chubby little hands and babbled excitedly, as if he understood this was his special place. I moved into what became known as Grandma's room, the smallest bedroom, just big enough for my bed, dresser, and rocking chair. It had one small window overlooking the neighbor's fence, but I hung cheerful yellow curtains and arranged my few photographs on the dresser. It wasn't much, but I told myself it was temporary. Once Mark found steady work, I'd find my own little apartment again. Those first months felt like a beautiful dream, like I was living my greatest purpose. I woke at 5:30 every morning, my internal clock trained by decades of caring for others. The house would be silent and peaceful, everyone else still sleeping soundly in their comfortable beds. I'd start the coffee first. Mark liked it strong and black. Sarah preferred it with cream and sugar. While it brewed, I'd begin breakfast preparations. Scrambled eggs with cheese for Mark, who needed protein for the physical labor jobs he was applying for. Pancakes cut into fun shapes for Emma, who ate better when her food was entertaining. Mashed banana and cereal for Jake, who was just learning to feed himself and made delightful messes. By the time Emma bounced downstairs in whatever princess pajamas she'd chosen for the day, breakfast would be ready and her favorite cartoon queued up on the tablet. She'd climb onto the kitchen stool I'd bought specially for her, her legs swinging as she chattered about her dreams. "I dreamed about unicorns again, Grandma Rose. They were pink and purple and they could fly. Can we look for unicorns in the backyard today?" "We can definitely look," I'd tell her, braiding her hair while she ate, adding little butterfly clips because they made her feel special. "But first, let's get you ready for preschool so you can tell Mrs. Peterson about your unicorn dream." Jake would wake up cranky from teething, his little face red and tear-stained. I'd walk him around the house, singing the same lullabies I'd sung to Sarah 30 years ago, the ones my mother had sung to me. His tiny fingers would curl around mine as he gradually calmed down, and eventually he'd settle against my shoulder with those sweet baby sighs that made every sleepless night worth it. After getting Emma ready for preschool, and settling Jake for his morning nap, I'd tackle the housework with military precision. Laundry sorted, washed, dried, and folded. Dishes cleaned and put away. Floors vacuumed, bathrooms scrubbed, beds made with crisp hospital corners. I moved through the house like a determined ghost, making everything perfect before Sarah woke up around noon. She worked afternoon shifts at a medical office now, filing insurance papers and answering phones. It wasn't the career she'd dreamed of, but it provided health insurance for the family and some steady income. She'd emerge around lunchtime looking tired despite sleeping late, her hair messy, still in the same pajamas she'd worn to bed. "Thanks, Mom," she'd murmur, scrolling through her phone while eating the sandwich I'd prepared. Her favorite turkey and avocado on the homemade bread I'd learned to bake, because store-bought was too expensive for their budget. I'd take over with Jake so she could shower and get ready for work, entertaining him with peekaboo games and reading the same picture books over and over in different silly voices. Then, I'd bundle him up for the walk to pick up Emma from preschool, pushing his stroller while he pointed at dogs and birds, babbling commentary on everything he saw. Those afternoon hours with my grandbabies were pure magic. Emma would burst out of preschool full of stories about her day, her backpack dragging on the ground, art projects clutched in her small fists. "Look, Grandma Rose, I made you a picture. It's you and me and Jake having a tea party with the unicorns." We'd walk home slowly, Emma collecting interesting rocks and leaves for her nature collection, Jake clapping at squirrels and pigeons. Once home, I'd spread a blanket on the living room floor for our daily adventure time. We'd play elaborate games with her dollhouse, creating complex storylines about the tiny family inside. I'd teach her letters and numbers using colorful blocks and magnetic letters on the refrigerator, making it fun with songs and rhymes. She was so smart, so eager to learn, soaking up knowledge like a little sponge. "Can you show me how to write my name again, Grandma Rose? I want to write it really pretty like yours." I'd help her with the crayon, guiding her small fingers as she carefully formed each letter. Her tongue would poke out in concentration, and when she finished, she'd beam with pride. "I did it! I wrote my whole name. Can I write Jake's name too?" Jake would crawl over during these lessons, pulling himself up on the coffee table, trying to grab crayons and paper. I'd give him his own sheet of paper and chunky crayons, letting him scribble to his heart's content while praising his beautiful artwork. I'd also use this time to teach them both life skills appropriate for their ages. Emma learned to help me fold washcloths and sort socks, making it a game with silly songs and sound effects. She'd stand on a stool beside me in the kitchen, stirring cookie batter or washing vegetables, so proud to be Grandma's special helper. "Look how good I'm stirring, Grandma Rose. I'm the best stirrer in the whole world." "You absolutely are, Sunshine. You're going to be an excellent cook someday, just like your mama." By 5 o'clock, I'd have dinner prepared. Hearty, comforting meals that stretched the grocery budget while providing good nutrition. Mark's favorite pot roast with potatoes and carrots, slow cooked until the meat fell apart. Sarah's childhood favorite chicken and dumplings, the recipe passed down from my own grandmother. Homemade spaghetti sauce that simmered all day, filling the house with the warm scents of garlic and herbs. The house would smell like love by the time Mark came home from whatever day labor job he'd found. Construction, moving trucks, landscaping, anything that paid cash while he waited for permanent employment. He'd arrive exhausted and filthy, his work clothes covered in sweat and dirt, his hands rough and calloused from manual labor he wasn't used to after years of factory work. I'd have his shower things laid out, a cold beer waiting in a frosty mug, and dinner ready to serve within 30 minutes of his arrival. He'd emerge from his shower looking refreshed, grateful for the comfort and care. "You're an absolute angel, Rose," he'd say some evenings, settling into his chair at the dinner table with obvious relief. "I don't know how we'd manage without you. After the kind of day I've had, coming home to your cooking and a clean house feels like winning the lottery." Those words filled my heart with purpose and pride. I was useful. I was needed. I was making a real difference in their lives during their darkest time. From my monthly Social Security pension, $1,847 that had comfortably covered all my needs when I lived in my own small house, I contributed $800 toward rent and utilities without being asked. Sarah never directly requested the money, but she'd mention bills coming due or worry aloud about how tight things were. and I'd quietly transfer the money to her account the same day. "Mom, you don't have to do that," she'd say. But the relief in her eyes told a different story. "Family helps family," I'd remind her. "This is temporary until you get completely back on your feet." The remaining $147 had to cover my prescription medications, personal hygiene items, clothing, and any small treats or gifts for the grandchildren. It was tight, much tighter than I was used to, but I made it work. I stopped buying new clothes, making do with the same 3 outfits rotated throughout the week. I skipped my monthly lunch dates with old friends, claiming I was too busy with the grandchildren. I canceled my cable subscription since I watched television in the family living room anyway. But these weren't sacrifices. They were investments in my family's future. I was watching my grandchildren grow up, helping them through a difficult transition, and supporting my daughter during one of the hardest times in her life. Emma learned to ride her tricycle in the front yard while I cheered from the porch, clapping as she pedaled in wobbly circles. Jake took his first real steps, holding onto my hands, his face lit up with triumph as he tottered between my outstretched arms. The photo albums I kept in my room filled with new memories. Emma's first day of kindergarten, dressed in the outfit I'd helped her pick out, her backpack almost as big as she was. Jake's first birthday party in their new home, his face covered in chocolate cake, everyone laughing as he tried to blow out the candle. For 18 months, this arrangement worked beautifully. Mark found steady employment at a different manufacturing plant. Sarah got promoted to office manager at the medical practice, and the family began to stabilize financially. Emma thrived in school, bringing home gold star stickers and reading certificates. Jake grew from a wobbly toddler into an energetic little boy who could climb stairs and sing along to his favorite songs. I thought we were all happy. I thought my place in their lives was secure and appreciated. I thought I was building something beautiful with them. But slowly, like storm clouds gathering on a distant horizon, things began to change. The first signs were subtle. Sarah started making small comments about my pace and energy. "Mom, you left dishes in the sink," she'd say when she came home to find I'd only finished half the dinner cleanup because Jake had been unusually fussy and needed extra attention during his afternoon nap. Or, "The laundry isn't folded yet?" when she discovered the clean clothes still in the basket because I'd spent 3 hours at the emergency room with Emma, who'd developed a high fever and needed immediate medical attention. I would quickly finish whatever tasks remained, apologizing and explaining the circumstances, but the criticism stung. After waking at 5:30 a.m. and working nonstop until evening, these small, overlooked details somehow became the focus rather than everything I had accomplished. Mark began changing too, subtly at first. He'd come home and head straight to his bedroom instead of sitting at the dinner table with the family. "I'm too tired tonight, Rose," he'd say, taking his plate upstairs. "Just need to decompress after work." The family dinners I'd worked so hard to prepare, setting the table with care, making sure everyone's favorites were included, creating a warm atmosphere for connection, became me eating alone while feeding Jake and helping Emma cut her food into manageable pieces. I told myself it was natural progression. They were under stress, adjusting to new routines, dealing with the pressures of rebuilding their financial stability. Marriage and parenting were exhausting work. I'd been through it myself decades ago. Everyone was just tired. But the comments became more frequent and pointed. "Mom, you're moving so slowly today," Sarah would sigh with obvious impatience when I couldn't keep up with her rapid pace of getting everyone ready for a family outing. I was 72 years old, with arthritis in my knees and hands that made every movement deliberate and sometimes painful. Some mornings, getting out of bed required several attempts and a few minutes of careful stretching to work out the stiffness in my joints. But I never complained about the pain. I never asked for help or accommodation. I pushed through every day because they needed me to. The criticism hurt more than the physical discomfort, though. After everything I'd given up and all the ways I contributed daily to their household, my slower pace was seen as an inconvenience rather than a natural part of aging. One evening while I was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner, I overheard Sarah on the phone with her friend Jessica in the living room. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but voices carry, and their conversation stopped me cold. "It's just hard sometimes," Sarah was saying, her voice tired and frustrated. "Having her here all the time, you know? She's always in the kitchen when I want a snack, always in the living room when we want to watch our shows. There's no privacy, No space that's just ours anymore. My hands stilled in the soapy dishwater. I held my breath, straining to hear more. I feel guilty saying it, but sometimes I feel like we have 3 kids instead of 2, she continued. At least Emma and Jake help themselves sometimes and don't expect me to manage everything for them. Each word felt like a physical blow to my chest. 3 kids? I had raised her, supported her through her darkest financial crisis, sacrificed my home and independence for her family's stability, and now I was being compared to a child? A burden rather than a blessing? I finished the dishes in complete silence, my vision blurry with unshed tears. That night, lying in my small room, I stared at the ceiling and wondered when I had become a problem to solve rather than a family member to cherish. The criticism escalated from there. "Mom, you're just sitting there again," became a common refrain when they'd find me resting in my rocking chair after a full day of cooking, cleaning, and childcare. Just sitting there, as if I hadn't earned a moment's rest, as if the previous 10 hours of service didn't merit 15 minutes in my chair with a cup of tea. They started having conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered rooms. Whispered discussions at the kitchen counter that clearly involved me but never included me. I'd walk in to get a glass of water, and they'd suddenly change the subject to something generic about work or the weather. Mark began treating me like I was invisible, speaking about me as if I weren't present. He'd ask Sarah to ask me things instead of addressing me directly, even when I was standing right there. "Tell your mom dinner was too salty tonight. Ask your mom if she can watch the kids tomorrow evening. See if your mom can pick up milk when she's out." I was physically present, but socially erased, a piece of furniture that occasionally required direction but didn't deserve direct communication. The breaking point came on a chilly Saturday morning in October. Sarah's friend Jessica had come over with her own elderly mother for a coffee visit. I'd spent extra time that morning cleaning the house to perfection, preparing a nice lunch spread and making sure everything looked welcoming for guests. I'd baked fresh cinnamon rolls from scratch, something I hadn't done in months because of the expense of ingredients. I'd arranged flowers from the backyard in a pretty vase, set out the good china I'd managed to keep from my previous home, and even put on my nicest outfit instead of my usual comfortable clothes. The women were settled comfortably in the living room while I served coffee in proper cups with saucers and offered the warm cinnamon rolls on my grandmother's silver platter. Emma and Jake were playing quietly nearby with their toys, well-behaved and content. I was helping Jake stack his colorful blocks while half listening to the adults' conversation, feeling grateful for this moment of normal social interaction. It had been so long since I'd had adult conversation beyond discussions of household logistics. "You're so incredibly lucky, Sarah," Jessica's mother was saying admiringly. "Having built-in childcare and help around the house like this must be such a blessing. I wish my daughter had that kind of family support. It's so expensive to hire help these days, and you just can't trust strangers with your children the way you can trust family." I smiled to myself, feeling appreciated and valued for the first time in months. Finally, someone recognized my contributions. Finally, someone saw the gift I was trying to be to this family. But Sarah's response destroyed me completely. "Lucky?" She laughed, but there was no joy in the sound. It was bitter, almost sarcastic. "I guess, if you look at it that way. Though honestly, sometimes it feels more like having another dependent than having help. She sleeps until 8 o'clock, wanders around in her bathrobe half the morning, and then acts like making breakfast is this huge accomplishment that deserves a medal." The room fell uncomfortably silent except for the children's innocent chatter and the sound of blocks clicking together. My hands froze on Jake's toy, my entire body going rigid with shock. Jessica's mother looked visibly uncomfortable, glancing between Sarah and me with obvious embarrassment. "Oh, well, I'm sure she does her best at her age." "I suppose," Sarah continued, apparently oblivious to her guest's discomfort or my presence just 6 feet away. "But honestly, she's gotten so lazy since moving in with us. Like, retirement means you just stop contributing to society entirely and expect everyone else to take care of you. Must be nice to have 0 real responsibilities and just coast through life." Lazy. The word hit me like a physical slap. She called me lazy. In front of a guest. In front of my grandchildren, who were playing innocently nearby, absorbing every word. I thought of my 5:30 a.m. alarm clock every single morning, for the past 18 months. The breakfast preparation, lunch packing, house cleaning, childcare, grocery shopping, dinner preparation, evening cleanup. I thought of my aching knees as I climbed stairs multiple times daily to strip beds and carry heavy laundry baskets. I thought of my monthly pension contributions that had kept their family afloat during Mark's unemployment. I thought of my house, sold, gone forever, to give them the security they needed. I thought of the previous morning, up before dawn, to prepare Mark's lunch and a special breakfast for Emma's school presentation. 3 loads of laundry washed, dried, and folded, bathrooms cleaned, floors mopped, groceries bought and put away. 4 hours of active childcare while Sarah worked and Mark attended a job interview. Dinner prepared from scratch and served at precisely 6 o'clock. All of that was lazy, apparently. All of those contributions were invisible, worthless, taken for granted. Jessica's mother glanced at me with unmistakable pity in her eyes, then quickly looked away as if witnessing my humiliation was too painful to watch. I stood up slowly, my arthritic knees protesting as they always did after sitting on the floor. "Excuse me," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. "I think I'll lie down for a bit." No one responded. The conversation continued, as if I hadn't spoken, as if I truly was invisible. In my small bedroom, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at my reflection in the dresser mirror. When had I become this person? When had I accepted being treated like an unwelcome burden in a home I'd helped provide? When had my love and sacrifice become so meaningless that they could be dismissed as laziness? I thought about my grandmother, who'd lived with us when I was Emma's age. I remembered how my mother spoke about her, with deep respect, genuine gratitude, and obvious love. Grandma helped with household tasks, but she was never made to feel like an obligation. Her wisdom was actively sought, her presence was treasured, and her rest was considered well-earned and respected. She was family, not a servant. She was valued, not tolerated. Something fundamental shifted inside me that day. A quiet revolution began in my heart, a realization that I had somehow lost myself in the desperate desire to be needed and useful. That evening, as I prepared dinner alone as usual, while Sarah got ready for an evening out with friends, I made a decision that would change everything. After everyone had eaten and scattered to their separate activities, I opened my laptop and began searching for apartments in my price range. Small places, senior-friendly communities, within my reduced budget, but places where I could live with dignity and respect. Over the next week, I quietly began the process of reclaiming my independence. Not with anger or dramatic announcements, but with steady, careful determination. I researched neighborhoods, made phone calls during the hours when everyone was out, and slowly began organizing my belongings. I found a perfect 1-bedroom apartment in a well-maintained complex designed specifically for seniors. It had a compact but efficient kitchen, a cozy living area with plenty of natural light, and a lovely view of a community garden where residents grew vegetables and flowers together. The rent was $650 a month, well within my pension budget, and included heat and basic cable. For the first time in months, I felt a flutter of genuine excitement about the future. I put down a deposit and arranged a move-in date 3 weeks away, giving myself time to pack carefully and transition gradually. I also gave myself time to process the emotional weight of this decision and prepare for the difficult conversation I knew was coming. Sarah noticed the moving boxes first. I'd been carefully packing my belongings during the quiet morning hours, sorting through my possessions, and deciding what truly belonged to this next chapter of my life. "Mom, what are you doing?" she asked, finding me folding clothes into a box in my bedroom. "I'm packing," I said simply, continuing to work without looking up. "I'm moving out." "Moving out? What do you mean moving out? Why? What's wrong?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, for the first time in months. When had she become someone who could call me lazy without a second thought? When had I become someone who accepted such treatment without protest? "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart," I said gently but firmly. "I've simply decided it's time for me to have my own space again. I found a lovely apartment that I can afford, and I'll be much happier there. But Mom, we need you here. Who'll watch the kids when we both have to work late? Who'll help with all the housework? Who'll cook dinner every night?" The irony wasn't lost on me. Suddenly, now that I was leaving, my contributions were not only visible, but essential. Now I was needed. Now my work had value. "You'll figure it out," I said gently but without backing down. "You're both capable, intelligent adults. You managed perfectly well before I moved in, and you'll manage perfectly well after I leave." Mark appeared in the doorway, drawn by the sound of our conversation. "Rose, if this is about money, we can work something out. Maybe we could pay you a little something for helping with the kids and the house." "It's not about money, Mark," I replied, meeting his eyes directly. "It's about dignity. It's about being treated like a family member instead of an unpaid servant. It's about having my contributions acknowledged instead of being called lazy when I've given everything I have to give." Neither of them could meet my gaze after that. I didn't launch into accusations or demand apologies for months of dismissive treatment. I didn't catalog every sacrifice I'd made or every hurtful comment I'd endured. I simply continued packing my life into boxes, reclaiming pieces of myself I'd gradually surrendered in the name of being helpful. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange, tense atmosphere. Sarah and Mark seemed to be processing the reality that I was actually leaving, that their built-in support system was disappearing. They made half-hearted attempts to convince me to stay, promising things would be different, but we all knew the damage was done. Emma sensed the change in the household dynamics. She became clingy and anxious, following me around the house and asking repeatedly if I was still going to live with them. "Where are you going, Grandma Rose? Will you still make me pancakes? Will you still read me stories?" My heart broke a little more each time she asked. "I'm going to have my own special apartment, Sunshine," I explained gently. "But I'll still see you lots. You can come visit me, and I'll come visit you. Nothing changes how much I love you." Jake, at barely 2 years old, didn't understand what was happening, but he sensed the tension and became more fussy than usual. He'd reach for me constantly, as if afraid I might disappear. The morning of my move, I woke early one last time in that small bedroom. I made coffee and sat in my rocking chair, watching the sunrise through the tiny window, reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this moment. I wasn't leaving in anger or bitterness. I was leaving to save what remained of my relationship with my family, and more importantly, to save what remained of my self-respect. The movers arrived promptly at 9 o'clock, professional, efficient men who treated my belongings with care and respect. As they loaded my furniture and boxes into their truck, I felt a complex mixture of sadness and relief. Emma cried and clung to my legs as I prepared to leave. "Don't go, Grandma Rose. Please don't go. Who'll make my favorite pancakes? Who'll help me with my letters?" I knelt down to her level, despite the protests from my arthritic knees, and pulled her into a warm embrace. "You'll visit me in my new home, and I'll teach your mommy how to make pancakes exactly the way you like them. And you're getting so good at your letters, you hardly need my help anymore." Jake toddled over on his chubby little legs and raised his arms to be picked up one last time. I held him close, breathing in his sweet baby scent, memorizing the weight of him in my arms and the way he curled against my shoulder. Sarah stood in the doorway crying quietly, as if she was beginning to understand the magnitude of what she was losing. Not just free childcare and housekeeping, but a grandmother's love that had been freely given and poorly received. As I stood in the driveway holding the keys to my new apartment, Sarah finally approached me. "Mom, I'm sorry. I know we haven't shown enough appreciation for everything you've done. I know I said some terrible things. Can we try again? Can we start over?" I hugged her tightly. This daughter I'd raised and loved and sacrificed everything for. She was still my baby, despite everything that had happened. "I love you, Sarah," I said firmly. "That will never, ever change. But I need to love myself too. I need to live somewhere that my contributions are valued and my presence is wanted, not merely tolerated." My new apartment was small, but absolutely perfect for one person. I arranged my furniture exactly the way I wanted it, hung my few precious pictures where I chose to see them, and set up my coffee maker to brew at 7:30 a.m. instead of 5:30. That first morning in my own space, I woke naturally as sunlight streamed through my bedroom window. I made coffee in my favorite mug, the one with roses that Sarah had given me for Mother's Day years ago, and sat by the living room window watching birds at the feeder I'd hung outside. No one needed breakfast prepared. No one required lunch packed. No one expected dinner on the table at precisely 6 o'clock. The silence wasn't empty or lonely. It was peaceful, full of possibility. I called Emma every single day and visited twice a week, just as I'd promised. She would run into my arms like always, but now our time together was precious because it was limited and intentional. We made pancakes together in my little kitchen, just the two of us, and she told me all about her school friends and her teacher and the books she was learning to read. Jake would toddler around my apartment, exploring every corner with the curiosity of a child in a new place. But when he got tired, he still preferred my lap for his afternoon nap, and I cherished those quiet moments. Sarah visited regularly too, though our initial interactions were tentative and careful. She seemed nervous, as if she expected me to be angry or resentful. But I welcomed her with the same love I'd always had, just with healthier boundaries and better self-respect. "How do you like living alone again?" she asked during one of our early visits, looking around my cheerful little apartment. "I like it very much," I answered honestly. I'd forgotten what it felt like to rest without guilt, to have my own space, to make choices about how I spend my time. She was quiet for a long moment, processing my words. "I think we took you for granted, Mom. I think we forgot that you're not just Grandma. You're Rose, a person with your own needs and feelings." "You did take me for granted," I agreed, without accusation or anger. "But I allowed it to happen. I taught you that my contributions didn't have value by not requiring that they be valued. I enabled the very treatment I resented. I never meant to make you feel lazy or worthless. You worked so incredibly hard for us, gave up everything for us. I know you didn't mean it that way, sweetheart, but intent and impact aren't always the same thing. The road to heartbreak is often paved with good intentions." 6 months into my new independent life, I began to rediscover who Rose was beyond her roles as mother, grandmother, and household helper. I joined a book club at the community center where I met other women my age who had fascinating stories and perspectives to share. We read everything from mystery novels to memoirs, discussing characters and themes over coffee and homemade cookies. I enrolled in a watercolor painting class at the local senior center, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for when I was busy caring for everyone else. My first attempts were clumsy and childlike, but the instructor, a patient woman named Margaret, encouraged experimentation and self-expression over perfection. "Art isn't about creating masterpieces," she told our small class. "It's about discovering what brings you joy and giving yourself permission to create something purely for yourself." I made friends with my next-door neighbor, Mrs. Chen, a widowed woman about my age who had immigrated from Taiwan 30 years earlier. She taught me to make proper dumplings from scratch, and I shared my grandmother's bread recipes with her. We took evening walks together when my arthritis allowed, moving slowly but enjoying each other's company and conversation. Mrs. Chen had also lived with her adult children for several years after her husband died, and she understood my experience in ways my own family couldn't. "It's difficult," she said one evening, as we sat on the small patio outside our apartments, watching the sunset. "Our children love us, but they don't always know how to honor us. In my country, elders are respected for their wisdom and experience. Here, sometimes we're seen as burdens to be managed rather than treasures to be cherished." "Did you feel invisible in their home too?" I asked, grateful to finally have someone who understood. "Very invisible," she nodded. "My daughter-in-law would speak about me as if I weren't sitting right there. My grandchildren were taught to think of me as the babysitter rather than their grandmother. I cooked, cleaned, helped with homework, but somehow I was always in the way." "What made you decide to leave?" "One day I realized I had forgotten who I was before I became their solution to every problem. I looked in the mirror and saw a ghost of myself. That's when I knew I needed to choose dignity over duty." Those conversations with Mrs. Chen helped me process my own experience and realize I wasn't alone in feeling discarded despite my contributions. Many older women, especially mothers and grandmothers, sacrifice their own identity and well-being for their families, only to find themselves unappreciated and taken for granted. I still contributed to my grandchildren's lives, but now it was by choice rather than obligation or guilt. I babysat when Sarah asked and when I was available, not whenever they needed last-minute coverage. I cooked special meals when I wanted to share my talents and create memories, not because dinner was expected on the table every night at 6 o'clock. I gave gifts because I loved giving and had something meaningful to share, not because I felt indebted or obligated to contribute financially to their household. The boundaries I established weren't walls, they were bridges to healthier relationships. Emma began to see me as Grandma Rose, who lived in the fun apartment with the bird feeder, rather than the person who was always available to meet her needs. Our time together became more intentional and precious. Jake, now a chattering 3-year-old, would run to me during visits, but didn't cling desperately. He knew I wasn't disappearing forever, which made him more secure and independent. He'd explore my apartment with confidence, then settle in my lap to look at picture books or play simple games. Sarah's family adapted to my absence, as families always do when necessity requires it. They hired a babysitter for the times when both parents had to work and no other childcare was available. Mark learned to pack his own lunch and appreciated it more because he'd chosen what to include. Sarah discovered she could manage household tasks efficiently when she had to, and she felt pride in her own capabilities. Surprisingly, their marriage grew stronger when they had to rely on each other instead of depending entirely on me to manage their domestic life. They became partners again, rather than parents who delegated their responsibilities to the convenient grandmother. Emma learned age-appropriate independence skills. She could pour her own cereal, make her bed with crooked covers that satisfied her, and help fold small laundry items. These accomplishments made her proud and confident, rather than dependent on adult assistance for everything. Last spring, Sarah called me during a particularly challenging week when Mark was traveling for work, and both children had been sick with a stomach virus. "Mom, I don't know how you managed everything for so many months," she said, her voice exhausted but respectful. "I'm completely drained, just handling our normal routine for 5 days without backup. I can't imagine doing it constantly while also being criticized and unappreciated." "You manage it the same way I did," I told her gently. "One day at a time, with love and determination and lots of coffee. But the difference is, you're doing it for your own family, in your own home, making your own choices about priorities and methods. That sense of ownership and control makes all the difference in the world. I think I understand now why you had to leave. I don't think I would have learned to value what you did if you'd stayed and continued doing it. Sometimes people need to experience the absence of something before they can truly appreciate its presence," I agreed. This past Christmas was the first holiday since I'd moved out, and I was nervous about how it would unfold. But Sarah invited me to spend Christmas Eve and Christmas morning with them, and it was one of the most beautiful celebrations we'd had in years. I arrived Christmas Eve afternoon with homemade cookies and carefully chosen gifts. The house smelled like the cinnamon rolls Sarah had learned to make using my recipe, and Christmas music played softly in the background. Emma rushed to hug me, proudly showing off the Christmas tree she'd helped decorate. "Look, Grandma Rose, I put the angel on the very top all by myself. Daddy held me up, but I did it." Jake, now confident in his walking and climbing, gave me a tour of all the Christmas preparations, chattering excitedly about Santa and presents and cookies. But the most meaningful moment came when Sarah pulled me aside privately. "Mom, I have something for you," she said, handing me a beautifully wrapped package. "It's not much, but it represents something important." Inside was a framed photograph of all of us from the previous Christmas. Me with Emma on my lap, and Jake leaning against my chair, everyone smiling naturally. But it wasn't just the photo that made me cry. It was the inscription Sarah had added at the bottom. "To the strongest woman we know, thank you for teaching us that love includes loving yourself." Below that, in Emma's careful kindergarten handwriting, were the words, "Grandma Rose is the best grandma in the world. I want you to know that we see you now," Sarah said quietly. "We see everything you sacrificed, everything you gave, and everything you taught us. I'm sorry it took losing you for us to learn how precious you are." I spent that night in my old room, now converted to a proper guest room, and woke up Christmas morning to the sound of children laughing and the smell of coffee brewing. But this time, I wasn't expected to prepare breakfast for everyone. Sarah and Mark had planned a special Christmas brunch together, and I was their honored guest rather than their unpaid help. During our gift exchange, Emma gave me a handmade card with crayon drawings of the two of us having a tea party. "This is for all the times you made me feel special," she'd dictated to Sarah, who'd written the words in neat letters below Emma's artwork. Jake, with help, gave me a small potted plant. "For your new home," Sarah explained. "So you'll always have something growing and beautiful." As I drove back to my apartment that evening, my car filled with thoughtful gifts and my heart full of renewed connection, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this place. I had learned that sacrifice without boundaries becomes martyrdom, and martyrdom serves no one well. My grandchildren didn't need a martyr grandmother who resented her invisible contributions. They needed a happy, whole grandmother who modeled self-respect and healthy relationships. They needed to see that love doesn't mean accepting poor treatment, that service doesn't require surrendering dignity, and that caring for others starts with caring for yourself. I had also learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is remove yourself from a situation where your presence is taken for granted, not from anger or punishment, but from wisdom and self-preservation. By leaving when I did, I taught my family that I had value. By establishing boundaries, I showed them what respectful treatment looked like. By choosing my own happiness, I demonstrated that their grandmother was a complete person worthy of consideration and care. Today, 18 months after moving into my little apartment, I wake up each morning at whatever time my body naturally chooses, usually around 7:30 a.m. I make coffee in my favorite mug, add cream and sugar exactly to my taste, and sit by my living room window watching the birds at my feeder. I have plans most days, but they're plans I've chosen for myself. Book club meetings, painting classes, coffee dates with Mrs. Chen, visits with my grandchildren, grocery shopping at my own pace, cooking meals I want to eat when I want to eat them. Some evenings, I prepare elaborate dinners just for myself, trying new recipes and savoring every bite. Other evenings, I eat cereal for dinner because I can, because no one else's preferences matter in my own home. I read novels until late into the night without worrying about early morning responsibilities. I take long, hot baths with expensive bath salts I bought for myself. I watch the television shows I enjoy without considering anyone else's viewing preferences. Tonight, I'll go to bed in my own comfortable bed, surrounded by my own choices, without the weight of resentment or the exhaustion of being unappreciated. I'll rest with dignity in my own space, having honored both my love for my family and my responsibility to myself. If you're reading this story and recognizing yourself in my experience, please know this. You deserve appreciation for your contributions. You deserve rest after your work. You deserve dignity in your relationships. And you deserve to choose how your love is given and received. Your sacrifices have meaning. Your service has value. And your worth as a person is not determined by how much others need you or how much you can give until you're completely depleted. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is teach people to value what they have by removing it from their lives, not from cruelty or revenge, but from wisdom and self-respect. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes care means stepping back. Sometimes the healthiest choice for everyone involved is choosing yourself. I am 74 years old now, and I am still learning to put myself first after a lifetime of putting others ahead of my own needs. It's never too late to remember your worth. It's never too late to demand respect. It's never too late to choose dignity over duty. Emma is now 7 years old and thriving in 2nd grade. She visits me every other weekend, and we spend our time together making crafts, baking cookies, and reading chapter books that are too advanced for her, but that she insists on attempting anyway. She knows I live in my own special place because I want to, not because I had to leave, and that knowledge makes her feel secure rather than abandoned. Jake is 4 now, full of energy and curiosity. He loves to help me water the plants on my patio and feed the birds that visit my feeder. He calls my apartment Grandma's Castle and tells everyone about the special cookies we bake together and the stories I read to him. Sarah and Mark have built a stronger marriage based on partnership rather than dependence on others. They've learned to manage their household together, share childcare responsibilities, and appreciate each other's contributions because they're no longer taking mine for granted. Sarah has become a more confident mother and wife because she's had to develop skills and systems rather than relying on me to handle everything. She's proud of her growth, and I'm proud of her too. Our relationship is healthier now because it's based on mutual respect rather than obligation. When I help them, it's appreciated because it's chosen, not expected. When I can't help, it's accepted because they have backup plans and aren't entirely dependent on my availability. Most importantly, I've discovered that the woman I was before I became a mother and grandmother is still alive inside me. Rose, not just Mom or Grandma Rose, but Rose the individual, has interests, talents, dreams, and preferences that matter. I'm taking piano lessons for the first time since I was a teenager. My fingers are stiff and my progress is slow, but the joy of making music again fills a part of my soul I'd forgotten existed. I've started writing letters to old friends I'd lost touch with during the years of intensive caregiving. Several have written back, eager to reconnect and share stories of their own journeys through marriage, motherhood, loss, and rediscovery. I volunteer at the local library once a week, reading stories to preschoolers during their weekly story time. Their faces light up when I do different voices for characters or add sound effects to action scenes. Their laughter and attention remind me that I have gifts to share beyond cooking and cleaning. Next month, I'm planning a small trip to visit my cousin in another state, something I couldn't have done when I was responsible for daily childcare and household management. The freedom to make such plans fills me with excitement I haven't felt in years. As I finish writing this story, sitting in my cozy living room with afternoon sunlight streaming through my windows, I want to leave you with this truth. You are more than your usefulness to others. You are more than your capacity to serve, sacrifice, and solve everyone else's problems. You are a complete person deserving of love, respect, appreciation, and dignity. Your needs matter. Your comfort matters. Your happiness matters. If you find yourself invisible despite your contributions, taken for granted despite your sacrifices, or criticized despite your efforts, please consider that you may be teaching people how to treat you by accepting treatment that doesn't honor your worth. It's possible to love your family deeply while also loving yourself enough to require respectful treatment. It's possible to help others while maintaining boundaries that protect your dignity. It's possible to be generous with your time and energy while still preserving enough for your own needs and dreams. The most valuable lesson I can share from my experience is this. Sometimes, stepping away from people who don't appreciate you is the kindest thing you can do, for them and for yourself. It gives them the opportunity to develop gratitude and self-reliance, and it gives you the opportunity to rediscover your own worth. You don't have to accept being invisible. You don't have to tolerate being called lazy when you work harder than anyone acknowledges. You don't have to sacrifice your dignity on the altar of family duty. You can choose differently. You can choose better. You can choose yourself. With love, hope, and hard-earned wisdom, Grandma Rose. Remember, your story doesn't end when others fail to appreciate your chapters. Sometimes the most beautiful part of your life begins when you finally decide to write it for yourself.